All right, continuing with Chapter 1, the last two sections in the textbook, we want to design our study. So we want to use statistics. We want to identify subjects to answer a question. We want to identify a variable that we're interested about. And then we need to think about, is it practical to use the entire population or census, or can we use a sample? Keep in mind that samples are not perfect and can lead to errors, right? Because each sample you get a different result. It's always better to use a population for accuracy, but it's not always possible. So typically people are busy making samples, okay? So there are many ways to make a sample. There are sampling techniques that are listed here. We have something called a simple random sample. We have a stratified sample, a cluster sample, a systematic sample, convenience or volunteer sampling, or self-selected, and multi-stage. So, how are we going to select our sample? We want to ask our class something. Not every day people show up, all the people that are in the class, so we're going to take a sample out of the class that came today. Do we want to use a simple random sampling? A simple random sampling is that every individual must have an equal chance of being selected. So I think I'd use my roster if I was taking a sample this way. I would have and the sample size, a sample of the size we plan, has to have an equal chance of being selected also. So step 1, assign a number to each person or member in the population, whether it's cans or cats or people. Each one of them gets a number. Then you select random numbers by using a random number generator in our text. Use your calculator or computer. Put the numbers or names on a slip of paper in a pile. Shake and pick, shake and pick, shake and pick. So each person or object or name in the hat can be picked. And you have to decide how many you want in your sample. Okay, so you can number your people and then put the numbers in a hat. So kind of separately have somebody choose them. That way their names aren't on the slip. You know, you can kind of disguise them by numbering them. But if most people use some sort of technology to do that, so they're numbered people, and then you pick random numbers, and that's assigned to a certain person. So that's just one way to do it. You can also do something called a stratified sample. Okay, so that means you're going to divide your population into groups, and then select some from each group. So if I'm looking at a classroom, and I want a sample of my classroom, I'm going to say, okay, each row of seats is a group. Okay, the first row is a group, the second row is a group, third row is a group, etc. And then what I'm going to do is randomly pick people in each group. So 2 people from the front row, 1 person from the second row, 3 from the third, randomly chosen from the different groups. Okay, so group first, some from each group. The cluster sampling is done when you're divided into groups, first, second, third row, like we stick with that. But then we're going to choose a cluster and use all of them, okay, or a group. So if I have the whole class divided into groups by row of seats, I'm going to pick 1 or 2 rows and ask everybody in those 2 rows. So group first, all of the group of certain groups, okay, versus some of each, okay. Systematic, you want to start at a certain value and then choose every kth mentor. Remember that one that was, we're picking every third person that goes in the door to ask them something? That's a systematic method, okay. So here's a little picture below. One of these is representing stratified, one's clustered, one's systematic method of sampling, okay? So we're looking through. I think it's pretty clear that this one is the systematic one. Every third house in a row we're asking questions to. They're choosing our subjects from, okay? And then you have two other ones. They are grouped first. See, this one has low income, middle income, high income. So there's three groups. And then notice that there are some from each group. So that would be stratified. Okay. And then this one is got different groups. But then one group is chosen and everyone from that group. So that is clustered. Okay. So systematic is this one down here. All right, then there is a convenience sampling or a volunteer or a self-selected. It's got many names. Basically, it's members that are readily available. If you just want to get the first person in the door for the day, first couple in the door, people only at lunchtime. A good example is the callers into a radio station. Or even if you send out flyers and you're only hearing from the people that send them back, they can be very biased because people tend to have stronger feelings that actually fill out the thing and send it in. So you're going to get them on both sides. So not everybody got asked, but only those with the strongest opinion. That happens a lot, okay, convenient sampling. But there can be a whole group of people you haven't heard anything from. So, especially if you're in manufacturing and you have, 100 cans or 100 boxes or whatever, and you just pull one out because it's the first one and top one, and look what's in that one box, that's a sample. But maybe you should open some other boxes and check them as well, right? So convenience sampling has its own issues. Multi-stage, you can group things, then group them again, then randomly pick some and group them. You can just any combination of these things. Okay, so let's check a little more. Let's practice. Identify which types of sampling can be used: random, systematic, stratified, clustered, voluntary response, or convenience. Okay, for each of these. All right, measure the length of time every ninth person coming into the bank waits for a teller service over a 2-day period. Key would be every ninth person. So that is systematic, right? Let's change this to a pen so I can... Ninth person, systematic. Okay, pregnancy study in Baltimore, randomly select 15 communities from the multiple. So just because it has the word randomly does not mean it's a random. So let's read the rest of it. Pregnancy study in Baltimore, randomly selected 15 communities from the metropolitan area, then interviewed all pregnant women in these communities. So selected 15 means there were more, but they picked 15 communities. So think about it. The subjects are grouped into communities. We have all these communities. You pick 15 of these groups, and then you're choosing to talk to everyone in these 15 communities. So grouped first, chose your group, and asked them all is a cluster. Okay. To prepare for her book, she sent out questionnaires. Basically, she's going to look at whatever came back, so that's a voluntary response. Choose a committee by dividing employees according to rank and then randomly sampled from each group. So we grouped them, okay, and then we randomly sampled from each group. That is stratified sampling. Okay. Journalist goes to a campground and asks people how they felt. I'm going to say feel about air pollution or felt about air pollution. So I'm thinking convenience. who's going to talk to him, who she ran into, who's there for that day, who happens to be around. Let's see, 6, calling randomly generated phone numbers. That sounds very random. Okay. And 7, divide population into groups. Then within each group, randomly select each group within each group. So grouped first, and then sum of each is stratified. Out of 10 hospitals in a municipality, a researcher selects one and collects records for a 24-hour period. So out of 10 hospitals, they pick one and get all the records for 24 hours. So that's a cluster. So group first, they were grouped. Each hospital is a group. There's 10 of them. You choose one hospital, get them all. So that's cluster. Okay. Reacher divides groups in according to general, major field, average, blah, blah, blah. So she's grouping them first, and then she randomly selects from each group. Stratified. Medical research study selects a hospital and interviews all the patients that day. Selects a hospital. That's kind of like we just did. Cluster. Okay.